Ay, la, 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 ay, la, ay, la, la, ay, la, 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 ay, la, 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 ay, la, ay, la, la.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning into tonight's event. My name's Kyle Zaldin, and I'm a 12th grade student here in Toronto, Canada, and the founder of Thoughts from Kyle. It's my honor and privilege to introduce tonight's event, which really came out of an idea I saw in the Sefer Emek HaSufganim, a 430-page book on the laws and customs of eating sufganiyot on Hanukkah. In one of the Haskamos, the approbations before the book, by Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein, one of the greatest Torah sages living today, he mentions that this book should serve as a way to fulfill the custom of eating sufganiyot, even though we're not actually eating them, but we're just learning about the history and the Torah issues dealing with sufganiyot. And with that, I came up with tonight's event, Feeding Your Soul. Yes, Hanukkah is about eating latkes and sufganiyot, lighting the candles, saying Al Hanisim, giving praise to Hashem. But really, the essence of the holiday is just to feel the spirituality, the increased light in the darkest time of the year. And so that's why I've partnered with rabbonim and rabbeim, educators and teachers from all over the world who have sent in videos that will be played as part of tonight's event. I hope you enjoy and get true inspiration and motivation, as well as some new knowledge from their words. Chanukah Sameach, a Freilich in Chanukah, and hope you enjoy tonight's event.
Special thank you to Kyle Zaldin from Toronto, 12th grade. Just the fact that he asked me to make this video in itself is an incredible inspiration. I'm a Rav in Muncie, and because of WhatsApp and technology, I get to be a Rav of really all over the world. Interesting WhatsApps and shailas and questions, and I never dreamt that I'd be able to give a shiur to 1,000 people every single day for even if it's 3 minutes. You know, that's the attention span today, and that's the amazing koyach of WhatsApp. And here I hope to share with you a thought or two about sufganiyot. You know, you grow up in Israel, so the donuts, the jelly donuts, have a real name, sufganiyot, which is actually based on a Mishnah in Yerushalmi, Masechet Challah. Sufganiyot, the jelly donut. And I want to tell you a thought, that the next jelly donut, when you're about to get ready to eat the jelly donuts, you can't imagine. Someone recently told me the amount of donuts that are sold on Hanukkah, and actually it's already being sold now in Brooklyn by the millions. But we can miss out on the opportunity. See, the minhag, there is a custom. It comes actually from the father of the Rambam, to have sufganiyot. And he says, don't belittle. It's a very important minhag. But how easily can we just end up losing ourselves, literally diving into the donut and losing ourselves in the jelly? I want to tell you what I think is one meaning about the donut, and why is it that there's jelly inside the donut. And of course today there's different surprises, custard and all the different types of varieties of donuts, and there's a tremendous deep lesson. Take the word Kislev, the month of Kislev that we're in right now. Kislev is a pocket around the heart. There's a battle that every one of us goes through throughout the year, and especially now, Hanukkah is the time to focus on this point. Open up the halacha. The halacha in Shulchan Aruch says in this beginning of Taf Reish Ayin Aleph, the halachas of Hanukkah, that there is no obligation to have a meal in Hanukkah. That's very strange. We all know, usually, when there's a holiday, a Jewish holiday, so the joke is, most holidays are based on the fact they wanted to kill us, we won, let's eat. Now, sounds a little bit degrading, but in truth, it's definitely a true point in halacha. Look at every holiday is celebrated by eating a meal, a festive meal, being tremendously thankful with wine and meat. There's a mitzvah of simcha. Yet when it comes to Hanukkah, it's not. Now the Chafetz Chaim in the Mishmur already explains, based on the Lavush, an earlier commentary, and it's a very, very profound idea. The idea is, let's go back in history. What should we focus on during this holiday? Exactly what took place then. There was a battle between the Greeks and the Jewish people. But the battle wasn't a physical one. It was a spiritual one. It was a neshama. They were looking to take away the neshama. They had no problem with us even staying around and living. But they wanted us to join them. They wanted us to leave the focus of the internal and focus on the external. The internal part of the Jewish people is in the neshama, the soul. Shemen, interesting. Shamna is the oisios of neshama. Mishnah is also neshama. It's everything about the deep place in every one of us. Chanukah is a time where we're going to enjoy the donuts, but we have to look inside the donut. Maybe that's why there's such a surprise. What's going to be inside the donut? And when we eat that, and we enjoy it, and make sure not to eat too many of them, we're going to focus on the idea of the inside. And in every one of us, I always tell people, think you want to know how to really grow. Decide first, who's the real you? Every one of us is made of a soul and a body. The soul's inside, the body's outside. When we asked ourselves, who are we? And we really dig in and look deep, we realize we're a soul, because the body's not the real us. Interesting that the Arizal Kabbalistically says this. He brings a proof in the Psukim that when smearing oil on one's body, it says Valadam lo yisach, it says on the person. The Arizal anyway explains the idea is that the external man, the body that we have, is a shell, it's a space suit. But the real us is in the neshama. So how do we use this practically? What does our soul want to be fed with? And it's amazing that Kyle, who's running this program of feeding the soul, it's right on the money. Right on the money. Because every part, in fact, the different customs, whether it's money, Chanukah geld, money, whether it's food, whatever the minig, it's all about the idea that the Greeks took anything that we have, even money, and defiled it. They took away the neshama, they took away the soul, and they made it dirty and ugly. They took the oil, we couldn't find pure oil. You know, the Pnei Yeshua, one of the great commentaries, says, we didn't need to find oil that was pure because you're allowed to use impure oil when it's for the tzibur, when it's for the public. So why did we do it? Why? Why did we even have this great miracle? Why did Hashem orchestrate it? And the answer is to teach us this message. Hashem wanted to know. Chanukah was a time, once in a history, where God reminds us the main part of us is a soul. It's the purity. And if we can't relight and rededicate the temple and rededicate ourselves to our Judaism after the Misyavnim, all the Greek and the Hellenists were trying to take away that beauty. Now, one way of feeding our soul is by celebrating, by thanking Hashem, by davening. There's one other aspect that I think is kedai and very worthwhile focusing, and this is written in the holy books. If you look in the candles of Chanukah, there's what's called the Or Haganus, the hidden light. That hidden light is the 36 hours that existed, that the powerful light existed in the time of creation. It was put away. It was hidden. It was hidden where? In these candles. What's amazing is that it was hidden in these candles, and the only way to retrieve it is two ways, Chanukah and through learning Torah. That's the power of Chanukah. Dig in and make sure that our souls are being fed properly this year.
Chanukah is an amazing, amazing time. It's where we tap into our victory over the Greeks. And the question is, what was our battle? We talked about our victory over the Greeks. What was our victory? What did the Greeks represent? And what was our ideological victory over that challenge? Because we know that the Greeks didn't try to kill us. Haman, when it comes to Parliament, tried to kill us. The Greeks didn't try to kill us. This was an ideological battle. And the Chazal say that they tried to darken our eyes. There's a lot of discussion when it comes to darkness and light. We know that part of the miracle was the miracle of the menorah, the Neros Chanukah. The oil lasted for 8 days. What's this notion of light? Physical light, spiritual light. So there's a powerful idea. When it comes to Chanukah, we're talking about 2 levels of darkness and 2 levels of light. When it comes to physical darkness, you can't see. There's no clarity. But when it comes to spiritual darkness, it's the same sense. It's a darkness that clouds up your spiritual vision. You don't see what's your purpose in life. Who are you? What's the spiritual truth of the world? And the Greeks, they tried to darken our eyes. They tried to block our vision, understanding of truth. They said, you have no share in the Torah. In other words, you have no connection to anything higher, anything beyond this physical world. And the Maharal said that this was the fundamental problem with the Greeks. The Ramban says that the Greeks believed only that which their intellects would tell them is correct. If it wasn't based on reason and logic, they didn't believe it. And Torah embraces reason. When it comes to learning Gemara, we use our intellectual faculties, our reason, our logic. But when it comes to that which transcends reason, we also embrace it. The Torah is that which is lamala minatava, that which transcends reason. And this is the beauty of Torah. Torah is or, light. And not only do we have physical light, but we have spiritual light. And that's the Torah, that's the real miracle of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the Torah of the Chag of Torah Sheba'al Peh. We tap into our Torah, the fact that we can learn Torah, and not only do we receive the Torah Sheb'Ksav, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us on Torah, but Torah Sheba'al Peh is where we engage in Torah, we create, we innovate based on the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. We invest in ourselves into Torah, and when we immerse ourselves in Torah, we become Torah, and we create Torah. And that's the beauty of Torah. The Gemara says that when Adam first was alive, he realized that the days were getting shorter and the nights were getting longer, and he thought the world was going to end. But right around the equinox, right around Hanukkah time, the days started getting longer. The nights started getting shorter. This is the transition point where darkness starts to fade. Right now, where it's the darkest point in the year, the days are the shortest, the nights are the longest, but Hanukkah is the light and darkness. And the Zohar says that when you have a candle and you light it in the day, it doesn't do much. But in the darkness, one candle can illuminate a room. And right now, we live in a time of darkness, not only during the year, but, where's HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Do you see spirituality in your life? Is it easy to see spiritual truth? No. But when you tap into that truth, when you tap into the light of Hanukkah, you light a small flame and it illuminates an entire darkened world. And that's what we're doing, pursuing Yisra. We light near Hanukkah. We just throw that light out into the world and say, I'm so connected to Torah truth. I'm so connected to who I am. But in addition to being connected to Torah, I want to share that with others. I want to illuminate this world. And that's the or of Hanukkah, that's the or of Torah. Torah comes to the root of or, oraisa. And that's our mission, is to recognize that we're still fighting that battle against the Greeks. We're still trying to understand Torah truth, and we're still trying to reveal that truth to the world.
I want to share with you a parable. Imagine a husband who's married to his wife, and they have a classic marriage. Sometimes things are good, sometimes things are not so good. And this husband comes home from a long, hard day of work. The wife herself has had a very difficult day of work, and on top of that, she has all the pressures of the home. And her husband comes home, and it's 8 o'clock at night. And as he walks in the door, the wife says to him, can you please do the dishes? I haven't had a chance to do the dishes today. Can you please help out and do the dishes? And of course, the husband says yes. Why would he not want to help out his wife? But he asks if it's possible, if he could have half an hour, just half an hour to relax before he does the dishes. And his wife, being totally understanding, says, okay, for sure. So the husband goes to his lazy boy, he goes to his recliner, he sits down, he's relaxing. And about an hour later, his wife comes in and she says, I thought you said you were going to do the dishes half an hour ago. And of course the husband answers back. He feels a little defensive, and so he says, I'll get to it. I'm just so burnt from the day. And then it becomes a fight, and she says, but you said you were going to get to it half an hour ago, and this is what always happens, and then you don't end up getting to it, and then it falls on me to do it in the morning because you didn't get to it at night, and your mother never liked me. You know how these arguments go. One thing leads to another. And the wife, in her state of rage, she just decides, that's it, I'm out, and she leaves the home, slamming the door behind her. The husband is upset. He doesn't understand, what's the big deal? It was just half an hour. I would have gotten to it eventually. So he gets up and he does the dishes. But that night, 12 o'clock at night, 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, his wife is still not home. He's calling frantically all of her friends. He's WhatsApping her. He's texting her. He's doing whatever he can to get in touch with her. But she's non-responsive. Finally, she sends him a WhatsApp and she says, I just need some space. I'm okay, but just leave me alone. The next morning, he wakes up He gets the kids off to school. His wife is still not there. He goes to work. He's trying to get in touch with his wife the entire day. Usually she's the one that picks up the kids from school. She's not responsive. So with no choice, he leaves work early to be there to take the kids home from school. And the kids are already starting to ask questions. They want to know, where's mommy? And he says, oh, mommy's just taking care of some things, pushing off the issue. He doesn't really want to get into it with his kids at that point. He makes them dinner. He's putting the kids to sleep. And the kids are asking, where's mommy? Where's mommy? And he's like, oh, mommy's out. Don't worry, she'll be back. But that night again, she doesn't come home. The next day, she's still not home, refusing to answer any messages, blue-checking him left and right. A week goes by, a month goes by, the kids stop asking questions. He's the guy in the community that everybody is talking about, like, did you hear what happened? She left, she's non-responsive, nobody knows where she is. Months go by, years go by. This husband, he makes bar and bat mitzvahs. He makes weddings by himself. He walks his kids down the aisle by himself. How tragic. And finally, after 30 years, the man is retired, the kids have grown up, they all have children of their own. After 30 years, one random night, not even a knock on the door, but the wife opens up the door. She just comes into the house. And from her vantage point in the front of the house, she can see that her husband is sitting in the lazy boy reading a book. And she can also see right into the kitchen. And she sees a stack of dirty dishes in the kitchen. Imagine that wife turns to the husband and she says, it's been 30 years. You still couldn't do the dishes? Now imagine the husband's reaction at that point. That wife is clearly in danger. Because it's true, I haven't done the dishes. The dishes are still sitting in the sink and it bothered you 30 years ago. But when we start to think about the relationship and the imbalance in the relationship, you just left for 30 years. So can we really blame the husband at that point for not doing the dishes? And the same thing is true with us and God. When's the last time we heard from God? We are so exceptionally loyal to Hashem. We really are. We haven't heard from Him in thousands of years. And yet, we're still here, doing our best. Do we make mistakes? Of course we do. But would we make these mistakes if Mashiach was here? If God's presence was transparent in the world? Would we really be making these mistakes? Of course we wouldn't. And so, yes, we have to take responsibility for the averos that we do. But at the same time, we have to put our averos in context. There is no more prophecy in the world. There is no Beis HaMikdash in the world. And so to hold on and truly be faithful and loyal in the relationship is very difficult, and yet we do it anyway. Isn't that unbelievable? This, on some level, encapsulates the message of Hanukkah. On Hanukkah, we light the menorah in the darkness. The darkness represents the fact that Hashem's presence is not clear in this world. In our current state, Hashem's presence in this world is basically not seen. And a person has the capacity to simply deny the existence of God. And yet a Jew lights a candle in the darkness and says, despite the fact that my wife has been gone for all of this time, I'm still holding on to hope in the relationship. And that's why Jews, no matter how observant or not observant they are, so many Jews are so deeply connected to the mitzvah of Hanukkah. Because we know in our heart of hearts that wife is coming back. We're holding on to faith in the darkness. It is my deepest hope and prayer that as we consider our time in this world, and we think about our disloyalties, and we think about the averas that we've done, that we also learn how to treat ourselves with compassion, to understand that every mitzvah that we do is so exceptionally precious to Hashem, that every time that we get up to daven, even if we don't have any kavana at all, every time we give tzedakah, every time we light Shabbos candles, whatever it is that you're doing, every single mitzvah is bigger than you could possibly imagine. The most beautiful and exceptional mitzvah in the world, because you've chosen to be loyal to the relationship even in the darkness. Do we do things we're not proud of? Of course we do. We all do, including myself. But we have to understand that if we were living in a state of Mashiach, it wouldn't be like this. In the meantime, our job is to hold on to faith. To hold on, even in the darkness of the winter, to be able to say, I'm not giving up hope on this relationship. Is there anything more Jewish than that? I imagine not. Wishing you all an illuminated Hanukkah of blessing, of hope, of peace, and of light.
Hanukkah comes in the deepest and darkest part of the winter, when we've settled into our habits and our routines, when we've given up on that vision, that dream of who we can become. And just then we're called upon to light the menorah, to ignite a spark, to start a flame, to become lit ourselves. Ein lanu reshus lehishtamish b'hem. We're not allowed to benefit or use that light. Ela lir'osam belvad. We look at it, and in it we see ourselves. The or haganuz, that hidden light, that capacity to see from the beginning of the year to the end, to envision and picture that best version of ourselves. The Gemara tells us that the shear, the measurement you're allowed to light the menorah, is achetich regel min hashuk, until people are no longer walking around the marketplace. It's a halachic definition. In Corona times, in places that are locked down, quarantined, or there's curfew, that time might be earlier than ordinary years. But in addition to the technical halachic definition, there's a deeper meaning. Rav Moshe Leib Sassover says, regel min hashuk. The shuk means the mall. It means Amazon. It means thinking that our happiness will come from more things. Stop going min hashuk. Stop going to the mall. Stop going to Amazon or the market. Stop accumulating and amassing material possessions and things and thinking you'll find your happiness or your meaning there. The menorah has to burn bright. Our neshama has to be lit on fire until we stop going and looking for happiness. Where? Min hashuk. This is a time to consolidate. This is a time the world is using the terminology of essential versus non-essential, what matters versus what doesn't. Beis Hillel teaches us mostly v'holich, that we add on each day. We start at 1 and we go to 8, and therefore we grow. We see ourselves being better and improving. But Beis Shammai have an opinion too. They say we go from 8 to 1, poches v'holich, and while we don't accept that opinion, there's still a lesson to learn from it. Rav Pinkus says the lesson is consolidating. Sometimes you add by subtracting. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes reducing to the essential and not the non-essential makes us better. And therefore on this Chanukah, Achetichla regel min hashuk, stop searching for happiness. Stop trying to find it elsewhere. Stop going to the shuk. The Sfas Emes says Achetichla regel min hashuk. Regel means hergel. It means our habits. We are mindlessly living life. We've settled into habits and patterns and behaviors. Achetichla, the Chanukah, the menorah has to burn bright. That candle has to flicker until we've broken those habits. Don't simply be a creature of habit. Don't mindlessly walk through life. Don't be a composite of what others want from you, but determine who you are and who you're meant to be. Burn bright and illuminate the world and light up your life. And lastly, Rav Avram Shor says, Achetichla regel min hashuk, the shuk, the market, is the stock market and the real estate market. The market is the place we think we draw our income from, and the regel is our own initiative. The menorah has to burn bright until we realize, submit and surrender. There's a God. He is in control. He determines whether a flask lasts for 1 day or 8, whether the few and the weak can beat the mighty and the many. He is the one who brings our parnasa. Achetichla regel min hashuk. Stop thinking you're in charge and you're in control. Stop thinking you control the market and you're the one who brings your income. Break that regel. Regel, one of the 4 paradigms of damages, the most common found one. We have to break that regel, the damage of thinking that our initiative is responsible for everything. Min hashuk. Stop thinking we control the market and realize that all of our parnasa and that everything in fact flows from above. When we do, then we can feel lit and we can light that candle. Not to use the candle, but simply to see ourselves in it, to use it for a picture of the best version of ourselves, to brighten and illuminate our lives and the lives of all around us. A freilichen and a lichtige Chanukah.
Recently the Jewish world lost one of our great leaders, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain. Just a powerful human being and a truly inspiring leader of the Jewish people. And after his passing, there were many videos being shared, many of his talks, many quotes. And one specific video that was being shared was titled The Jewish Algorithm. You can find it on YouTube. It's a 10-minute clip. It's a very powerful 10-minute clip and something that really moved and inspired me. And specifically, there are 2 ideas, really 2 quotes that he shares in that video that I feel actually encompass the message of Hanukkah. And I want to share those 2 quotes and those 2 ideas with all of you now. The first idea, he says, is a quote from Shakespeare's The Twelfth Night. And in it, Shakespeare writes that some are born great, some achieve greatness, but some have greatness thrust upon them. And in the video, Rabbi Sachs is, of course, referring to, the Jews in general, that as a young Jewish person, he was speaking to a crowd of university students that, they don't have a choice. Being a Jew means you are great, means you have an obligation, and a implicit obligation to change the world. And that's a very powerful idea. It's also a very, big responsibility that can potentially frighten people. What does that have to do with Hanukkah? Because I think that idea, the recognition that as a Jew you have greatness thrust upon you, I think that was a recognition that the Maccabees had when they decided to battle the Greeks. You see, if you think about it logically, it seems almost insane. It's a moment of insanity for a group of a few thousand, 20,000 people to go up against hundreds of thousands of Greeks. Here you had a group of Jewish leaders that were willing to stand up and fight against the Greeks. And so what was behind that? What were they thinking? What was the mindset that they lived with in that moment? And I really think it was this idea that Rabbi Sachs brings down, that they understood that message, that we don't have a choice. As a Jew, in a time when people are threatening our existence, greatness is thrust upon us. We don't have a choice whether we're going to choose to be great or whether we can even think of this as a decision. It is a no-brainer. This isn't a decision. We must go and fight, even if we don't have the weaponry, the manpower. At the end of the day, we don't have a choice because we have been chosen as Jews, and as a Jew, we have a responsibility to fight for who we are, for our values. And so when someone is coming to attack us, even when it seems insurmountable, even when it seems impossible, greatness has been thrust upon me. I must fight. And I think that's what the ideal that they lived with then, and that's what the ideal that we have to live with now, even though we may not be attacked in a guerrilla warfare type of way, but we're also attacked in a different type of way with potential values and ideals that go against us, with anti-Semitism, with assimilation. We have to recognize that we can't wait and decide and even think of it as a decision that maybe I can fight, maybe I can fight back against those evils. No, we don't have a choice. You must fight back, because greatness as being a Jew means you're great. The greatness has been thrust upon you. You don't have a choice. That's idea number one. And that's, I think, how the Maccabees, the ideal that they lived with in order to fight. The second idea is the second quote, which Rabbi Sachs shares in this very powerful video. And that is, he says that it's not about the idea of power, but rather the power of ideas. Again, it's not about the idea of power, but rather life is about the power of ideas. And I think that really represents, and then and now, the contrast of the Hanukkah ideal and the opposite ideal. The Hanukkah ideal is wisdom, light. We light the menorah with lights. Light represents Torah, represents wisdom, and that has always been the power of the Jewish people, that we represent and we understand and we know intuitively that beyond all the materialism, the ultimate sense of beauty is the beauty of wisdom, the power of ideas, the power to think and learn and study, and that is represented by light. And then there were the Greeks. The Greeks were all about the idea of power, of conquering, and that idea isn't over. I think that idea has permeated throughout history until now, where there's this part of the world that believes in the idea of power. It's all about conquering, and then there's the Jewish people, which, no, we're going to stay in our homes. We're not here to conquer, and we're not going to celebrate by bringing out shields and swords that we won a battle. That's not what the real miracle was. The miracle was that we retained our wisdom, our ability to learn and still be able to study Torah and be Jewish. And so we really live with that idea that it is the power of ideas, not the idea of power. And I think that really is the second theme of Hanukkah and the second miracle, that we were able to continue to learn and study, and that vision that we had, that it's all about wisdom, not all about power, that overcame, and that won, that beat the opposite ideal, the opposite vision that the Greeks had. And so we have to fight with that ideal today, because the enemy is still there. The enemy of the idea of power is still fighting against our ideal, which is the power of ideas. And so again, I think if you can get this video.
Chag Sameach. It's now Chanukah. Chanukah Sameach. Such an amazing festival of lights. This holiday is probably one of the most often spoken about festivals in Rav Noson's writings, Rabbi Nachman's teachings, mainly Rav Noson, because all Rav Noson's thing was helping a person shine light in his personal darkness. And Rav Noson goes into this a lot. One beautiful insight is based on what the Zohar, the Tikkunei Zohar brings down, that when the dove flew back to Noach in the ark with a branch of an olive branch, right? Alezait taraf alezait befiha, that in her mouth she had a branch of the olive tree, right? The leaves of an olive tree, hinting that Noach, that there is survival, that there's growth now. The Zohar says, or the Tikkunei Zohar, B'Shimon Bar Yochai says there, that the dove was hinting to Noach the festival of Chanukah, because we light oil. Olive oil is used ideally for the Chanukah lights, and also commemorating the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash, which was lit with olive oil. So the dove was already hinting to Noach the idea of Chanukah. This is what the Zohar says. Phenomenal. What in the world is the connection between the olive oil being hinted to by the dove to the flood? What's the connection here? So Rav Noson explains something amazing, that the generation of the flood, their blemish was they went to low levels of profanity, of immorality. They dehumanized themselves to the lowest of levels, which is weird, because we're taught, Rashi explains in the Chumash, the Torah tells us, that the generation of the flood, they had everything. They were all well off. They had shefa, they had money, they had wealth, they had health, they had a good life, and yet they went to low levels of depravity, and they went to fall to such low levels of immorality. What's going on here? So explains Rav Noson that this world, as great as it is will never be complete. Completion is not at all attributed to this world. Shlemut, completion, is only attributed to the Torah, to the world to come, to Hashem, to the tzaddikim who master the Torah. That's what's called complete. But this world, since it's created anyways initially from a lacking, automatically any good coming from this world has to have lacking within it. So with that said, anybody who tries to master this world will always have something lacking. Rabbi Nachman goes into this in Sichot Haran, that even the wealthy people and the philosophers and the atheists, they're all full of tsa'ar, suffering, because things don't work out the way they wanted to work out. The Midrash brings a story of a Roman emperor who invited the sages to a ball, a feast that he made, and one thing was not right at the meal, and the Roman general, the official, got so angry, he took a golden table and smashed it. And the sages were shocked, why are you smashing your table? He says, this is all I have is this world. If things are not perfect, then what value is it to me? I have no value if it's not perfect. It has to work out perfect and as it should. And the Midrash brings us down to show us that there's no completion in this world. So now, the generation of the flood, they had everything, and yet, because even though they seemed to have everything, in reality, there was a darkness, there was a hollowness. Because a person without God, without Hashem, without the Torah, without purpose in life, has absolutely nothing. So now that the generation of the flood fell to a level of immorality and depravity, indicates the emptiness that they felt. Why would they fall so low if they had everything? Because the reality was they didn't have everything. They had a big hollow because Hashem wasn't in their life. Torah wasn't in their life. The purpose of life. There were a few tzaddikim. There was one or two tzaddikim around at the time. There was Noach. There was Mephibosheth. All these generations, one after the next, from Adam to Noach, there was one representative of Hashem in the world that knew about God and existence and the true purpose in life. but the rest of the people weren't after them, so they automatically had an emptiness. Chanukah, the whole idea of Chanukah is that in a person's darkness that he has during this life in this world, to shine the light of Hashem, the light of the Torah, the light of the mitzvah, the light of Judaism, the light of a person's personal good points, his inner goodness, the belief that good exists in a person, so that as dark as a person feels in life, he can shine that darkness with this light. That's the whole message of Chanukah. This was the message that the Yonah, the dove, was showing to Noach, that this now is the antithesis of the blemish of the generation of the flood, is to shine in a person's darkness, which means a person feels a lack of completion, which is understood to be felt and to experienced when a person lives in a physical existence in this world, because anyways nothing is perfect. So a person has an attitude of darkness. To shine the light of Chanukah is the shining the light of Hashem, the light of the Torah, the light of Judaism, and the light of oneself into that darkness, one's inner self-confidence, one's inner good points. This is the message that the Yonah was showing to Noach.
Hi, this is Rabbi Mark Rose, the Thornhill Director for NCSY Canada, and here's a Chanukah thought to share. Most of us are familiar with the procedure for lighting a Chanukah menorah, that the way we light it is one light on the first night, and we add a second light on the second night till we go all the way up on the last day of Chanukah for 8 lights. Really, the halacha is, the law is, as long as you light one light for Chanukah, you've done the mitzvah. But it's a better way to do it, to increase the lights, to go from 1 all the way up until 8. But when we look back at our sages, we find that there's an argument, a machloket, on the best way to light the Chanukah menorah, where the Academy of Hillel says you should do the practice that we're most familiar with, start at 1 and go up to 8, whereas the other main yeshiva, the other main academy, Beis Shammai, says you should start at 8 on the first night of Chanukah, and you should go down to 1. Now that seems so anticlimactic, to really start at 8, and the second night you should go 7, the third night you should go 6, till the last night of Chanukah you should only have 1 flame burning. What's the reason? What's going on in the argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? We in fact know the practice of Hillel because the halacha says we should add more light to the world, we should not take it away. So that's why we're familiar with that practice. But what is the reasoning behind Beis Shammai? What's the argument all about? Well, Rav Shlomo Yosef Zevin, in a sefer he writes, explains that the light of the Chanukah, the flame, really has actually 2 functions. There is a function of light, which represents goodness and spirituality, everything that's good. But flame can also burn up, like the fire on the Mizbeach, on the altar, which would consume korbanos. Fire can also burn up. Fire can be used to represent, to destroy all the negative forces that are in the world. So the argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is really not who's right and who's wrong, but really an argument of emphasis. Is it more important to spread the light, the spirituality, the light of Chanukah to the world, or is it more important to combat evil? In ourselves, do we work on emphasizing our good qualities and building our self-esteem? Or do we focus on removing, on correcting the negative character traits that we have? What's the best way ultimately for growth and for success? And in that, there was the emphasis that Hillel and Shammai put on whether to go from 1 to 8 or from 8 to 1. Ultimately, the reason we go from 1 to 8 is to add more light to the world, not to take it away. And both sides have their merit in this argument. Both kind of give more of a complete picture. But our job, as we look at in the world today, is to increase the light. And we should all be zoche, we should all be deserving to do that this Chanukah.
Haneot halalu kodesh hein. These Chanukah candles are holy. Ve'ein lanu reshut l'shtamesh bahem ela lirotam bilvad. And we are not permitted to use them for any practical purpose, but only to gaze upon them. We say this paragraph after we light the Chanukah candles each night. It means that we cannot derive any utilitarian benefit from the Chanukah candles. We can't use them for light or for warmth. We can only look at them and reflect on their beauty. Hanukkah is often associated with gifts, especially for kids. When we get material objects and gifts, we try to figure out what we could do with it. How does it work? What are its features, its specs? Is it the latest model? What else do I need to buy for it? The lights of Hanukkah are perfect just the way they are. There's nothing that they do. We just sit with them, be with them, follow the flame with our eyes, and don't try to do anything with them. There is an incredibly popular and effective technique used in therapy and beyond called mindfulness. Dr. John Kabat-Zinn defines mindfulness as the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. It means noticing and observing our environment and our experience as it is, without judging. There are mindfulness meditation exercises that are great techniques for managing feelings of stress and anxiety. You can pick one sense, sight, smell, taste, touch, or hearing, and you focus all of your attention on just observing your sensations with that sense. One example is to light a candle in a dark room and meditate on the flame. You observe it, notice the colors and the movement, the flickering. You gaze upon it and appreciate it for what it is without passing judgment. In my opinion, this can be accomplished with the Hanukkah candles as well. There are even great Hasidic rabbis who have the custom to sit and watch the Hanukkah candles. The Hanukkah candles are holy, kodesh hem, which means they are perfect just the way they are. Ve'ein lanu reshut lishtamesh bahem ela l'rotam bilvad, and we are not permitted to use them for any practical purpose, but only look at them. One final thought: what is true for objects is even more true for people as well. Sometimes we have the tendency to view relationships as mutually beneficial. Either consciously or subconsciously, we think about how someone else is fun to be around, they make us feel better about ourselves, or maybe they just raise our social status, we're social climbers and they're a good connection. The soul of a person is the candle of God, to paraphrase Proverbs. This Hanukkah, let's also try to appreciate people for who they are and not for what they provide for us. Happy Hanukkah.
A Freilichen Hanukkah. I would like to share with you an amazing insight relevant to the Yom Tov of Hanukkah. Every morning at Kriyas HaTorah, we read the Parsha of the Nesiim. Every day a different Nasi brought a carbon to inaugurate, to be Machadash, Chanukas HaMishkan, Chanukas HaBeis HaMikdash. Every day of the 12 Nesiim was a different Nasi and a different carbon. Even Shabbos was the Nasi from Shevet Yosef. The Medrash asks the following Shaila: why is it, how is it that the carbon is Doicha Shabbos? The carbon of the Nasi of Shabbos was Doicha Shabbos. These are klal, a carbon tzibur, for an example, a carbon tamid, carbon shal shachar, shabein rabbeim, is Doicha Shabbos, it's Ba Mishal Tzibur. Klal Yisrael chipped in together to bring the carbon, it's Doicha Shabbos. The carbon Musav, also Doicha Shabbos, Musav Shal Shabbos. Even though Shchita, shechting a carbon is considered Chilul Shabbos, it's Doicha Shabbos. However, when it comes to a carbon Yachid, for an example, somebody did an Aveira, a sin, he wants to do tshuva to bring a chatas, very important, but it's not Doicha Shabbos. The same thing is also when it comes to a shlamim, a toida. Person wants to say thank you Hashem. Of course it's beautiful, but it's not Doicha Shabbos. A carbon Yachid is not Doicha Shabbos, only a carbon tzibur. And therefore the shaila is, when it comes to the carbon of the Nesiim, each Nasi brought his carbon for himself. It wasn't a carbon tzibur. So the Medrash asks, how is it Doicha Shabbos? The Medrash answers, the Medrash says, it's Doicha Shabbos because it's a Hiroas Shah. It was a Hiroas Shah that it was Doicha Shabbos. Which means it's a one-time exception. Why? Why is there a one-time exception? Why? Why Taka? It's a carbon Yachid. Why should it be Doicha Shabbos? Explains the Chafetz Chaim that from this carbon we learn a very powerful lesson. And that's why it's Doicha Shabbos. You see, when each Nasi wanted to bring his carbon. Really, there was no description of what the carbon had to be like. Every day the Nasi came to bring his carbon, he could have brought what he thought would be the perfect carbon. And imagine the second Nasi coming and bringing a carbon that would be better than the first day's Nasi's carbon, different, more interesting. That would cause kinna, jealousy, a bad feeling to the other Nasi. So the second Nasi, when bringing the carbon, said, even though I might have my unique way of bringing what carbon to bring, still the Nasi said, I'm going to do the exact same as the first day, not to cause any hard feeling. And so went all the Nasiim. All 12 Nasiim brought the exact same carbon, every single one of them. This sensitivity and this achdus and this bein adam lechaveroi, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's so important to me that even though the matana of Shabbos that I gave to Klal Yisrael, which is also very important, it reminds Klal Yisrael that I created the world, the seventh day I rested, but still, if such an important lesson comes about because of the carbon, bring it, even though it's a carbon yachad, that even though usually it's not Doicha Shabbos, here will be Doicha Shabbos. What a powerful lesson we have over the days of Chanukah. Achdus, sensitivity, bein adam lechaveroi. So whether if you're going and you're not sure if to go to a Hanukkah party, or you are going, you're not going, family events, let's all work together on Achdus, on bein adam lechaveroi. And I would like to wish you all a freilich and Hanukkah.